Hello, my name is Kristen Bressler, and today I will be giving my presentation titled A Prime Look into the Field of Cryptography. To begin, I wanted to give a quick background on cryptography and its importance. Cryptography studies the methods and algorithms that are used during the process of data encryption and decryption. When we send data over unsecured networks, it is often important that this information is only able to be seen and interpreted by the intended receiver of the message. So without even really knowing it, we are using cryptography every single day, such as when we send emails over the internet or when we log into our bank accounts. We are using encryption techniques. There are two main types of encryption algorithms, asymmetric and symmetric. Over the course of this presentation, I will be focusing on asymmetric cryptography, which is also known as public key cryptography. In particular, I will outline two popular public key cryptosystems, RSA and Elliptic Curve. Before we delve deeper into these two encryption methods, I first want to detail the basic outline of public key cryptosystems. Let's suppose that Bob, who is featured on the left of your screen, wants to send a message to Alice, who is featured on the right of your screen. To begin, Alice will need to have generated a private and a public key. These keys will be used in both the encryption and decryption processes. Next, Bob will obviously need to craft his message, which in this instance is "Hello World." Again, remember that the goal of cryptography is to ensure that Alice is the only person that can interpret this highly important message that Bob wants to send Alice over the internet. However, before we encrypt our message, Bob will first need to encode the message. Since encryption algorithms are mathematical functions, the string "Hello World" must be encoded into a numeric value that can then act as an input into our encryption algorithm. In this basic example, we see that Bob encodes his message and that message is encoded into a binary value as shown on the screen. At this point, Bob is finally ready to perform encryption using Alice's public key, which, as the name implies, is publicly known to everyone, including Bob. Bob can encrypt his encoded message, which then outputs an encrypted value, which in this case, again, is a different binary value from our encoded value. The encrypted value can now be sent over an unsecured network, which in this instance is the internet. Since the message is encrypted, anyone who intercepts the message will be unable to interpret its original meaning. However, Alice will then receive this encrypted message. Then, through the process of decryption, she can use her private key, which will unlock the encoded message as an input into her decryption method. The decryption algorithm only works with the knowledge of the values found in Alice's private key. Thus, as the name implies, it is important that this private key is kept private and only known by Alice. If Alice's private key were to be compromised, then unwanted third parties would be able to decrypt Bob's and anyone else who sends a message to Alice. Kept secret, the only way that hackers would be able to decrypt Bob's message would be by guessing Alice's private key values. Although guessing may not exactly be the accurate way of describing this process of breaking algorithms, as there are intelligent ways to cut down the number of values to test as Alice's private key. Still, the process of breaking the encryption algorithms that will be later described are incredibly difficult, which is why these algorithms are industry standard. Finally, after Alice has decrypted the encrypted value, she's left with the encoded value. From the encoded value, she can decode or use a decoding algorithm to get the plain English text message, "Hello World," that Bob sent. Now I'll be talking about RSA. RSA is one of the more popular public key crypto systems, and it is often found in things such as password encryption. To begin, like I mentioned before, it is important that the receiver has a public and a private key. We will start by generating two random prime numbers that are quite large. In fact, in application, they are often over 1 million digits in length. These two large randomly generated numbers we will call P and Q. They will be kept private. Then we can define N to be P multiplied by Q. After N has been found, where N is a public key, we can find our second public key value, which we will denote as E. And E is co-prime to the Euler-Phi function of N. Now you may be wondering, what is the Euler-Phi function? The Euler-Phi function returns the number of numbers that are between 1 and n and are co-prime to n. So again, that the Euler-Phi of n will return the number of numbers that are co-prime to the number n and are between 1 and n. Then to find E, the value of E must be co-prime itself to the value that was output of the Euler-Phi of n. So again, co-prime, in case you were unsure, means that two numbers cannot share a common factor. So for instance, they can't both be even because they both have a common factor of 2. At this point, using an algorithm called the extended Euclidean algorithm, we can find our final private key value, which we will denote as D. D is the multiplicative inverse of E modulo n. And again, if you are not sure exactly what modular arithmetic is, E modulo n gives you the remainder of E divided by n. So for instance, if we wanted to do 3 modulo 2, 3 divided by 2 gives the remainder of 1, so 3 modulo 2 is 1. At this point, we have developed both our public and private key for our RSA crypto system, and we are now ready to encode our message. Often for RSA cryptography, we will encode our message using the ASCII character code values that are just a common recognized value for each of the characters, and we can combine their values to create a numeric value for the string of characters. And once we have encoded our message, we are ready to encrypt. And the encryption algorithm is seen below the table of public and private keys. To encrypt, we take our message M, which is the encoded value of our message, so the numeric value of our message that we have encoded. And we raise M to the power of E and take that result modulo n. And the output of that equation, we get our encrypted message, which we have denoted as C. Then, once the intended receiver of this message gets the encrypted message C, they can then decrypt the message C by raising C to the power of D, where D is a value in their private key, and take the result of that modulo n. And the result of that altogether will give us our original encoded value, the value of our original encoded message, which then can easily be decoded, and we can get our plain English text. Finally, I wanted to talk about elliptic curve cryptosystems. And elliptic curve is often a topic within number theory texts. However, in recent years, elliptic curves have been applied to cryptography. And first, before we get into the cryptography side of things, I wanted to define what an elliptic curve is. On the slide, you can see 6 different elliptic curves plotted, and they all are of the form that is defined above. That is y squared equals x cubed plus ax plus b. And for the purpose of encryption, there are constraints to the values of a and b. So now that we kind of have a general idea of what elliptic curves are, I want to talk about how to encode our messages used in our elliptic curve systems. And the encoding process is a bit more difficult than RSA. For each character in our message that we wish to encode, each character will correspond to a point on our elliptic curve. So we will start by you can picture it as seen in the plot above as little subsections along the x-axis, where a point within a given subsection will correspond to the related character, usually from A through B, at least in this example, or A through Z, and a space and exclamation point in this example, but in application, usually you use like all the ASCII values or all the characters with ASCII value codes. And again, often in application, these subsections are 30 unit intervals. So what I mean by this is that if there's a point with an x coordinate between 1 and 30, then that point will correspond to the character letter A. And if there's a point between values on the x coordinate 31 through 60, that will correspond to the letter B, and so on. So in this plot above, we can see the points for the message "Hello World" plotted for a defined elliptic curve. Again, each subsection corresponds to a character that lies on the elliptic curve. However, our elliptic curve is defined over the integers. So these points have integer values for both the x-coordinate and the y-coordinate. To find points for each subsection, in each subsection for each character that we need to encode, we'll start by taking, for example, the letter A. If we need to encode the letter A, we'll check at point x equals 1. If the corresponding y-coordinate is an integer, then that point, 1, and whatever the corresponding y-coordinate will be the point that corresponds to the letter A. However, if, for example, the y-coordinate is 1/4, then we will skip over x equals 1 and go to x equals 2, and continue this process until we find an x-coordinate that has a corresponding y-coordinate that has an integer y-coordinate value. At this point, once we have encoded all of our points as points on the elliptic curve system, we are ready to encrypt. Through the process of point addition and scalar multiplication, which are operations that are uniquely defined for points on an elliptic curve, we're able to encrypt points. As you can see on the slide, the points plotted are characters of Hello World that are now encrypted. We use the points from the previous slide as those were the encoded values for Hello World. Using those encoded values, we were able to encrypt these points and now can send these encrypted points over our unsecured networks. Again, the process of decrypting once you receive these points will include the public and private keys of the receiver, who after they decrypt, they will get points that were in the corresponding subsections of each character of the message as shown in the previous slide. And then they can just string the characters they find together to get the original message. So overall, this presentation gave a pretty brief overview of 2 popular public key cryptography algorithms, RSA and elliptic curve cryptography. With limited time, I am unable to discuss kind of the deeper mathematical foundations of these algorithms, which make them nearly impossible to break with our current technology. However, if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to me. But at this point, I would like to thank you for taking your time out of the day to watch this presentation.